Hi, welcome to the Legislators Lounge. I'm Jim Webb, the host of the show. My co-host is Brian Chericello. Today with us is candidate for the state Senate, Frank Sapareto.
Welcome, Frank. We appreciate you coming on the show.
It's great to be here, guys.
Let's start off by maybe doing a little bit of an intro about yourself so
Sure.
the audience knows who you are.
Well, I moved here back in 1993 with my kid. Well, at the time we just got married, and I raised two kids through the public system. They went through all the elementary schools and through Pinkerton. And around 1995 or so, I was on the zoning board here in Derry. I served 2 years there, and then I was taxpayer vice chairman, then chairman of the taxpayer group back then, and later on elected to the House back in '97, and had the only uniform statewide property tax back then. When I also had Norma Sabella and some other co-sponsors that are fortunately aren't with us any longer. But at the time, we knew that was where it was going, and Derry got the largest tax decrease in its history that year in 1999 by almost $11 per thousand. Now it's climbed back up again, so that's why I'm still here and running. And since that time, I've served 6 terms in the House, mostly on Ways and Means, which is a very busy committee, as you know. Spent much time up there, and then I served on the Charter Commission as the vice chairman here for Derry back in 2006 when I was nominated for state treasurer at the time with 2 other nominees from the legislature, and then elected to the state Senate back in 2003 and 4, and then just finished 3 terms on Ways and Means for the House just now, as you know.
Right. And let me ask you the first question I'm going to ask is, what's the big difference between being in the House and in being in the Senate? Is it Well, I'll let you explain.
As you know, in the House, when you have that many legislators, there's you can spend more time to focus on one issue, and you can actually kind of ride that through and follow it, and you have a little more time because you have so many others. But you also get more bills, but they get taken care of in the general calendar, in the consent calendar.
Mm-hmm.
The Senate doesn't have that, so they get about 200 bills, and you have to be more knowledgeable and in depth on some of the issues. They're generally more technical than a lot of the House bills, so you have to spend more time with each of the bills. Mm-hmm. But there are fewer of them, and of course, what makes the biggest difference is that you have a secretary. And of course, as you know, in the House, you're lucky if you get half a locker of the time. So, but in the Senate, they give you you get a subscription to a newspaper. You even get a key to the building, so you can work on weekends. And I used to go in on weekends and work then too. Right. You can't do that in the House unless you're in leadership. Right. Yeah, so there are a few things that make it a little simpler. And as you know, one senator's vote is equivalent to almost 18 or 19 House members.
Right.
And it tends to be a little disconnect in the House and Senate. As far as who's more representative of the population. It depends on which issue it is, of course.
Right.
But the Senate's interesting.
So what made you decide that you wanted to run into Senate?
Well, as you know, this year we've had a lot of key issues, and one of the main issues is gaming right now, and we're on the verge right now of passing a bill which will probably pass in the next term. Whether you're for gambling or not for gambling, the votes are going to be there to pass it. And what happens in that bill is critical. As you know, there's $150 million projected gross revenues coming out of that bill, and there's about roughly maybe $17 million or $15 million of ancillary money locally that's going to be spent, as far as giving to the communities. Some of the revenue sharing that was been replaced back into the bill, $25.2 million. And that bill, as you know, is over 100 pages long. There are provisions in that bill that give towns money each year. And Ways and Means, as you know, we worked on it. We had that bill in our possession most of the time. And there are places in that bill where I know Derry can make out very well. And I make this promise now to your viewers. As elected, I will get $5 million more for my towns, for Derry particularly, than my opponents, because I know where in that bill that money is, and I know how to make those changes. One of the flaws in that bill that we just voted on was it had no appropriations. So you're getting maybe $100 to $180 million of revenue coming in without any appropriation. And we all know what would happen with that money. If Maggie had the opportunity, she'll take that money, balance the budget, and it would be as if we passed nothing, yet we have a big facility. Now, I believe it's going to bring in jobs. It's already set to kick in. The license is $120 million for the first, $80 million for the second. There's $200 million instantly to the state. In addition to that, there's 2,000 jobs and a requirement of almost $500 million within a 4-year period right into that community. It's a big boon in industry. If we had a corporation moving in other than gaming, we'd be we'd be begging for it to locate here to that size. But right now, the state's largest employer is Walmart. You know, we need to boost things in the economy. And if we can get that 150 million, the difference between me getting it and not is I plan on introducing that bill with direct legislation. I know with the help of my Republicans in the Senate, we'll be able to get this through. That will lower business taxes by 25%. So all of those viewers that are watching that own have a small business, maybe 1 or 2 employees, or maybe up to 50 employees who are getting whacked on the healthcare side, we're going to try to give you a break because we want you to stay in this town, in New Hampshire. And all we tend to do is chase out businesses. We need to become business friendly.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that. And we did pass some things last session when the Republicans were in control that helped the small business people.
Those were my bills. Most of them were my business bills.
Raised the limits for how much they had to actually declare on their taxes and so forth. And I know we did a lot to try to do that. Unfortunately, the progress kind of stopped.
Well, actually, a lot of it changed. And this is what my bills were, that I prime sponsored with the help of my Republican colleagues in the committee. We were able to pass a net operating loss decrease. So all those small businesses that had a tough time and struggled through the 7 years ago can write off those losses, continue to write those losses to recapture those losses because we can want to keep them in business. Another thing we did was we increased the business enterprise tax credit against the business profits tax credit. These are the 2 income taxes that we have for small businesses. You're paying up to 8.5%. We applied the credit to both. And one of the biggest things that we did for many of those small businesses was we made them, they used to be guilty until proven innocent in front of the Department of Revenue.
Right.
What we did was we changed that so that the burden of proof to prove that you aren't qualified for those deductions falls on the Department of Revenue as it should. That way a taxpayer should be not guilty until proven. And right now that means a lot for a lot of businesses, lots of litigation. It means we're saving money on auditors. And another big thing that I prime sponsored and again got through with the help of my committee members was the thresholds for those filing taxes. 20,000 of our New Hampshire residents are filing business tax returns with no tax due. So they're hiring accountants to prepare the returns, going through the hassle of having to file them all, getting them to the Department of Revenue, being read by an auditor that we're paying tax dollars for nothing.
That's,
of course
that's where I was getting at, because that's the part that, you know, even a small business, which I own a small business, and you know, you have to report it if you have income. So it wasn't working out. Now another thing, we'll stay on the revenue end of it, right? I know we were 1 vote shy this session of passing marijuana. And I'd just like to
we did pass it first time. They did pass it first time.
But when it came back to us from the Senate,
well, actually, no.
It came back from us from Ways and Means.
Which is my committee. Yes,
right, and we were 1 vote shy, and it was the Speaker who cast that.
No, that was
vote.
the gaming bill, though.
That was the gaming bill. Yeah, the gaming bill. We were short by
9
1.
votes on the
9 votes.
On the other one.
Okay.
Actually, we passed by about 9 votes initially, and then lost by maybe a little more than that the second time. But of course, you know, as we passed it, it was passed by the Policy Committee. Then it was sent to Ways and Means, where I was on the subcommittee that we weren't going to have one. They were just going to kill it outright.
Right.
But I said, well, wait a minute. There's millions and millions of dollars in here. Let's take a look at this. So we formed the subcommittee, and what we did was we streamlined that entire bill. We did all the regulatory issues. We got information from Colorado, from Washington, and the interesting part is we were getting revenue estimates coming in from Colorado. And the initial revenue estimate was about 67 million in gross revenue and about maybe 9 or 10 million in tax revenue. The last report we got was over 670 million in gross revenue and nearly 100 million in tax revenue. And the business taxes are through the roof in Colorado right now. They are booming the economy, you know, beyond booming, and Washington's about to follow suit. So we took a look at it and we said that, well, the tax structure that we have is really not very feasible. You've got too many places where people can cheat the system. So we did the entire regulatory structure. We had the growers, the manufacturers, the retailers. We had Department of Agriculture, Department of Revenue Administration, Bureaus of Weights and Scales. We involved all the departments to get them in to put a regulation structure in place. And then we simplified the taxation at the front end of it to be able to collect all the money. And we anticipated, very conservatively, 30 to 35 million. Now, that combined with decriminalization, in my opinion, will generate over $100 million for the state.
Right, but now the chair and the vice chair of the Ways and Means both did not support either gambling or the marijuana
bill. Be the
bill.
Former vice chair and vice chair.
Correct. It's Susan Almy and Patricia Lovejoy. Correct?
Actually, Pat Lovejoy did vote in favor of it.
Okay. All right, so
2 Democrats were there in control.
those 2 main revenue generators basically get shot down this year.
Right. The only 2 places that there's any money, well, Ways and Means, and I've been on it since it formed in 2000, there are no secret revenue sources. We know what our options are. There's income tax, there's sales tax, there's increased property taxes. I am dead set against all of them, and so is the legislature. They will not pass those.
Right.
So we're left with a value-added tax, which I still will not support too. That's a version of a sales tax. And now we're left with what do we do in New Hampshire? Booze, butts, and bets. That's where we make our money.
Right.
So given that, we only have 2 revenue options. We have the option of gaming, which already exists, which we're doing right now, and the other is stop the spending.
Yeah.
And you stop the spending by wasting all those millions of tax dollars on small amounts of marijuana, and instead go after the tough heroin problem that's killing people that they don't have the resources for.
Yeah. So why do you think gambling and marijuana didn't pass this year? Was it the way the bills were worded?
Well,
things needed to get buttoned up somewhere along the line?
Brian, we can't speak for our fellow colleagues. We know we all have personal issues. We even have reps here in our own town that voted against gaming, and I hope the voters take note of that, as they will in Salem.
Oh, yes.
You know, we had one rep here that just voted against it, and it's just too bad.
Right.
It's just not the will of the people.
Yeah.
You're voting against the economy here. But, you know, either way, it's going to go, but we got to make sure that it's done correctly. I mean, it's going to pass one way or the other. I'd rather see it done right. And again, the only other one would be marijuana. But the members of our committee that were determined, you know, didn't change their votes. In other words, it didn't matter what was in either of those 2 bills. They were just against the idea of it, right, which was the policy committee's purview. Now, of course, I believe, just as I'm sure you 2 do, that we're going to have a different legislature next year, and the makeup will be very different.
Right.
So we anticipate those would be passed.
Now, it's interesting you said that, Frank. I know you got a question, Jim, but I just thought about this. You know, the gambling bill had just as many Republicans that voted against it for various reasons as the Democrats did, which I found kind of fascinating. So.
Oh, right. It wasn't partisan.
So, I mean, so the statement, you think that the next time around, you think that it'll pass. Is that because of the particular issue?
Well, as you recall, remember House Bill 593 a few years ago, and this is why you need to put someone in that's had experience, because we've seen these bills before. These aren't new ideas. They've all been there. We had House Bill 593, which was the Republican position on the gaming bill, that written by Representative Steve Stepanek, who I anticipate will be chairing Ways and Means again. And in that bill, there were appropriations, and rather than just throw that money at the problem, what he did was we lowered taxes with it. That's what we have to do. We're complaining that businesses don't want to locate here because we're not doing anything to attract them. We're not look at what New York's doing. They're doing tax-free zones. I mean, my God, what an incentive for many businesses to come. And meanwhile, we're still stuck on one issue, on right to work, while face it, these small businesses aren't heavy labor intensive. They just want to be able to survive in the tax environment. And when they're paying an 8.5% income tax, and the only state in the country, New Hampshire is, that taxes you to borrow money to start a business. Right. No other state in the country does that. We're really holding up a "don't come here" sign. We got to change that, and the way we change that is we replace and lower those taxes with other revenue, and we lower the spending, and that's the only way we're going to do it.
Yeah, I'd agree with you 100% on that one.
And I know I've seen some of the waste in government. I used to think there wasn't a lot of waste in the system, but I know where there's a big waste, where millions of dollars are being wasted in government, and we got to go after those areas.
Now, let's go a little bit on another subject.
I almost got into one of them.
You just mentioned it.
The EBT cards.
Yeah.
You know, I put that bill in on the EBT cards. I introduced a bill that said that you couldn't spend EBT cards money on alcohol and tobacco. Now, this is money that we're giving to people to survive. Right. That they may have lost their job, or they've had an issue or illness. These are people who actually really need that money, and we're finding millions of dollars are being spent on alcohol and tobacco. Now, that's just plain wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the attitude up there is that from many legislators is that this is their money. This is the poor people that we give them to. It's not their money. It's the taxpayers' money
And the poor woman that got fired.
She testified in favor of my bill, and they still killed the bill.
You know, and then there's the other part of that portion, as you see, for instance, every month, right, I think the cards should be zeroed out.
Yeah.
So if there is any bills that come forward, that would be something they should tack on as an amendment, because you're given the money to survive, not to use it as a savings account.
That's right.
And if you need it during the month, you need it. If you don't.
For some of these people, it's a party account.
An ATM.
And we had
cash.
Representative Tim Horrigan saying, well, we shouldn't be telling them what to do with their money.
Wow. Yeah.
Or they say
is.
they'll just go out and get cash if you don't allow that. And,
Right.
and yes, they will.
They still could do that, but I mean, if anything we can do to make it more inconvenient or discourage that type of behavior is what I'm in favor of. Because I'm all for helping people who are down to help them to survive,
Right.
but I'm not going to support their bad habits.
Right.
Yeah. Personally, I just go back to the food system where you give them the food because then you have put people to work distributing and all, right down the line there'd be people working.
It's interesting you say that, Jim, because like the WIC program works that way.
Sure.
And you don't really see the fraud in the WIC program.
Right.
I think they
right.
give them tickets or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I've seen some. I've actually volunteered in some programs. I volunteered in the Rockingham County Wheels on Meals program. You know, preparing foods and things for weeks. My son helped too. We did it to residents of Wyndham and Salem area and Darien. We had a blast to it.
Awesome.
That's a good program. That's really going to people that really need help. You know, they're wonderful people, and what an efficient system that is too. And they're doing a great program.
Yeah.
well, you touched base on that one subject as you were talking. You said the words, so I'll hit you on that one right now. As you know, many of us voted last session against the right to work bill. Now, the right to work, where do you stand on that bill?
I voted against right to work. And the reason for it is because I'm for smaller government. Government should be telling people how to act or behave in any way, just like that's where my position is on gaming. And many Republicans we're all for free choice, as long as it's the choice that I would make. You know, I'm not like that. If we're about individual rights and choice, and our party is, and we get to stand by that and the decisions that we allow people to make, that's their decisions, not ours to make. And I'm not going to tell you how to spend your money on gaming, and I'm not going to tell you how to negotiate with your employees or otherwise. And that's the way right to work is. Leave the employer and leave the employees alone. And that's where I've been. Now, having said that, I'm definitely in favor. I'm very pro-business. I'm very pro-jobs. And the way you do that is you do it by lowering taxes and cut spending. And I know, again, I know exactly where we're going to be able to do that. And as long as we're allowing people to make their own choices or negotiate their own ways in good faith, that's fine. So, you know I part with the party in some places, but you know, I'm just for smaller government. I'm just not in favor of that. And I'm glad you're going to ask that, because you're going to find some candidates up here who are going to try to ride both sides of that issue. And the voters will know I'm very clear where I stand on those things.
Right. Well, it's always good to know the reason why you stand behind your vote. So that's important to let everybody know. So Frank, what's the first thing you want to do if you get elected to the Senate? Give us an idea of what a bill that you would propose.
Yeah.
Well, to start off with, first of all, the way we do things in Concord now, I've seen it from both sides, having served in both House and Senate. There's a lot of pride of authorship. And part of that, we had a supermajority of Republicans 2 years ago, and we blew it. We had a chance to fix a lot of problems, and we did. You know, we balanced the budget out, which was way out of balance. Right. My committee in Ways and Means was dead on the money, the most accurate any Ways and Means committee has ever been in a term. We were right on the nose all the way through the term. And in order to avoid that type of pride of authorship, we need to be certain that we have a Republican member of the Senate in the House caucus so that the House knows Republicans know what the Senate is doing. We need to have a member of the House Republican caucus in the Senate caucus. The problem is we tend to get a fat head when we get over into the Senate, that we don't want those low representatives over there. That's the wrong attitude. And I was there the first year that they banned House members on the Senate floor and they banned senators on the House floor over nothing. Mm-hmm. It was the most ridiculous things, and it's disinterest of the public.
I mean, that's an interesting concept, because I know a lot of the current senators of the last term basically ran in the House, correct?
They were from the same thing my freshman year into the Senate. We moved in with Chuck Morris, Joe Kenny, mm-hmm. We had a lot of, no, I wasn't Russ Prescott, but Bob Waddell. We had a lot of members go from the House into the Senate, and we remembered how the House was, and we worked well, I thought, with the House members at that time. Craig Benson was governor, but since that time, you know, we've gotten away from that, where the House Republicans can't get things done if they're fighting all the Democrats and the Senate Republicans.
Right.
And the same thing for the Senate Republicans too. It just doesn't work that way. So, you know, as long as we have someone there that lets the other body know what they're doing and they know what we're doing, then there shouldn't be, you know, we should be able to work a lot more smoothly. Now, that being said, the first thing I plan on doing is meeting with Lou D'Alessandro, and I want to get bipartisan support to rewrite that gaming bill, to put those corrections provisions and all the work that we did in Ways and Means in it, and have that debated and discussed in the Senate. So that's one of my top priorities, because that means a lot of money and jobs for my district.
Right.
Right, and I tend to agree with you, especially what you said about the Senate and being disconnected. I know personally I put a bill in, and it's 19-0 in the House in committee and 5-0 against. It passed the House, and then it 5-0 against in and
it wasn't on the merits of the bill. It was in the bill. It was on personal issues there. You know, and another thing too is when you're up there a long time, as you know, you get to know people.
Right.
And you get to know what they're looking for, how they react, or who's your allies. And as you know, sometimes your worst enemy on an issue can be your best ally on the next one.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, experience does count. And I've seen more success for you two being up there over the years. When you first started, you weren't sure how things worked.
Yeah.
You know, and now you know how things work
you
and
get
where
to
they're
know
going.
after a while. After 4 years, you get to know some of the ins and outs and the personalities.
So I would
you
say
know what you
anyone-
need to do to get a bill passed.
Exactly, exactly. So that's why I would suggest that, you know, so my opponents probably should, and they do, serve in the House, or get an understanding for how the process works before they go for a higher office.
Right.
And I mean, because you really need to know what you're doing when you get to the Senate.
Now, you mentioned the Republicans a couple of years ago kind of blew it. Do you think that they pushed some of the social agendas way too far over to the right? I mean,
We allowed the message to be set by the opponents, by the Democratic Party. You know, we allowed ourselves to be criticized in certain areas when the fact was that we were left with a nearly $700 million biennial deficit. Oh, yeah. And of course, as you know, we got criticized for removing things like revenue sharing or the MET tax. You know, we had to make it a real tax that year to keep the money to balance the budget. And that was just a time bomb waiting to happen. In the 90s, we passed Metascam, which was this whole issue about medical and health care is that we had they were going to give monies to the hospitals, the feds were, and we decided that, well, we needed some of that money. So what we did was we taxed the beds, which is what they were giving the money for, to get the federal tax dollars so that they were neutral. They didn't have a tax increase or a decrease, but we ended up getting free federal money. And that stayed in place for maybe 10, 15 years or so, until finally we really needed the money and we took our portion of it. And of course, we got sued and we lost. Right. And now we need to come up with $50 to $60 million a year to help settle that, which would have been a much bigger problem. I think the settlement was in all our best interest, and we all voted for it.
Yeah, the settlement was a good settlement, I think.
Yeah. It costs money, though. We still have to raise revenue to pay for those things.
I think it was 30 to 40 million.
Well, it's more than that. It's about 50 million.
And there still is a lawsuit pending with one of the hospitals in Nashua.
Well, the one in St. Joseph's is another. I'm not so worried about that. It was the other major lawsuit that we had to settle. And now that that's done, we still need to come up with $50 to $60 million. Right. So we need a revenue source. Now, my philosophy, and I hope people remember this, that the way I look at it is I don't want to hold a gun to someone's head to collect a tax dollar. If I can get dollars voluntarily from the public, such as through vanity plates or things that are optional to them, gaming, you know, things that are things that they can either do or do without. Property tax, no. Income tax, sales tax, these are all, you got to pay it. That's the last choice. We have a lot of options for revenue, gaming being one of the largest ones. And if we're live free or die, then we should have the choice to do these things.
Right. Well, it's funny you mentioned vanity plates, because when I first got in the House, I actually did the research on the vanity plates to see how many plates people stopped getting because of the increase.
Probably wasn't much, I imagine.
Almost 20,000.
But look now, did you see the numbers in the paper yesterday? We got the largest number and the cheapest plates.
Well, we always have, though. We've always had the largest number per capita than any other state, and we've always been the least expensive.
We're still the lowest price for the plates.
Right, and we're making money on it.
Right, but we did lose 20,000 people stopped their vanity
The revenues
plates.
went up, though.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but that's why I didn't put the bill in, because we were still making $2 million on it.
Right, right. See, and I'm in favor of that, because that's optional. You don't have to have a vanity plate to survive.
No.
You know, it's up to you to do that. But you got to live in your house, and property taxes are now through the roof. A good example of that is the bill that I put in about Pinkerton. You know, I don't know about you, but I'm tired of paying for Chester and now Hooksett, and let's see what the other towns that are going there.
Auburn,
all of these other towns. Dairy property taxpayers are paying for the police and fire services for all those towns through Pinkerton.
Right.
So I put in a bill to stop that. Now I know the spin on it is try to say, oh well, you don't like Pinkerton, but if anybody who look beyond the first sentence of a story would see that the reason for it is they're not paying their fair share. Dairy residents are paying through the nose above what the others are paying. That's why our property taxes are higher than these other communities, because we're spending that. Pinkerton does cost money. We've got a $200 million facility we're getting zero taxes on in the center of town. And on top of that, we're paying for all the services for it. And every time they buy a property, it comes off the tax rolls, and you and I are paying the property tax for it.
Well, that's the portion I don't like about it. But in actuality, we actually, as a town, we actually do pretty good with Pinkerton because it costs us less than if we had a high school.
Now, I'm glad you said that, because I actually got the information on that and found that 1 year I put the bill in, there were 70 fire calls, there were 70 police calls. The Legislative Services calculated the total of that of over $2.3 million. We didn't get reimbursed for it, and that's their figures. So, yeah, I do have a problem with that, and that with us paying more than our fair share of property taxes. When you knock on doors, people are buried about property taxes, and too many of their legislators are, in my opinion, ignore it.
Right.
We can't just say it's too high. We got to do something.
And property
you can't
taxes,
just say stuff. You've got to do it.
Yeah, and the property taxes, that's where we get the money to run government.
Right.
And we all know in New Hampshire there's a lot of fees and whatnot. I mean, I'm surprised to know that some of the fees for food, the tax on food, is higher in New Hampshire than in Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah.
Quite a bit
it's
higher.
actually
by
cheaper.
3% higher.
Cheaper
So-
for me and my wife to go down to Methuen.
Right.
You can play Keno there too.
Right. So,
we actually
you know,
have been in a place that had Keno.
so that means
They kill that bill too. We could have passed that. That was my bill. I was a sponsor on
It's a
that, too.
non-tax revenue.
these high taxes, they're preventing people from going out to eat and quite a bit, especially if you're on a budget. So, I mean, do we roll some of those back? I mean, are you of the philosophy that if we roll those back, more people will have an opportunity to buy those services?
Right, and that's the Republican philosophy. You know, we're trying. I use this example. The Democrats in our committee had a cartoon up, and it was a cartoon about it said lowering taxes to get more revenue or business. What a joke! Ha ha ha! That's what they believe. You know, the other side believes that. Our philosophy is make it more competitive, entice businesses to come here, do things that attract them, whether it's through our workforce, the schools, the labor, all those things can be done efficiently. We can draw them here, but you can't do it when we're advertising the highest cost to do business in the country.
Right.
You've got to lower those things, and in order to lower those costs, you either have to raise revenue or you've got to cut spending, or a combination of the two. Now, many say all those things, but they don't tell you how they're going to do it. I'll tell you how we're going to do it, and I've identified those places, and it's substantial for the state. We're going to get there. It's a matter of sooner or later, I think.
Right.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that. But as far as people leaving the state, that was another thing I wanted to touch base on the schools. And we have a lot of people that are leaving the states, particularly in Derry. I think the school system is down like 700 students right now.
So where it was at our peak, I remember back in the taxpayer days, we had over 6,000 students.
And now, but our taxes are at its peak too. So there's a problem.
In those days, we had 6,000 students, and we had a school budget of 27-30 million, and now we have what, 5,200 or so, 5,300 students, and the school budget is
85 million, which is a lot. So we do have that, and then you'll have the people like I know a couple on my street, their children just graduated. They're considering leaving. So this is a big issue for Derry, and particularly that the people come, they like Pinkerton, they want their kids to go to Pinkerton. When they're done with it, they sell the house, then you get little kids moving again. Right. Then the whole cycle starts over again.
My neighbors just did that.
Yeah. So the cycle starts over again.
Yep.
You know, and that's something that will not sustain us eventually. And I know a lot of the people in the House this year were advocating an income tax. Would you ever vote for an income tax?
No, and actually a good example of that is Mary Cooney. We got her to say that on the committee, a Democrat, and when I was speaking on the, of course, it was the news crew was always in the room, and finally she admitted and said, we can't do this because we need an income tax.
Yeah.
You know, then that's really why. If they shoot down all the revenue sources, and we do have things that people do want us to spend money. They do want state police. They do want to have state government open. They do want to have, fire protection.
Highways plowed.
And highways plowed and the streets plowed and things like that. So it costs money to do that. And you know, for them, it's just another way to get the income tax in. That's part of the problem when we had all those Republicans. You had some so far to the right that they're doing everything to block it, and I think their main issue, some of them now, is a monopoly about the gaming.
Well, yeah, that's another thing.
Which is ridiculous. That's the way that the Executive Council awards contracts. They get bids and they award a contract. They don't give the contracts to every single paver in the state. They hire one, the best one.
Well, the idea that I've heard people say up there that, well, we're not getting enough money for this. We should be getting, instead of this, we should be getting a higher percentage.
If we're too greedy, we're gonna doom it.
Well, that's exactly where I'm getting at, because, you know, when I would say, you know, if you're going to give me $20 or nothing, $20 is better than nothing. So,
right. Well, that's my, you know, the argument of these people about saying that, you know, you don't have sustainable revenue or consistent revenue. Great, but revenue is still better than zero. That's what we're getting now.
Yeah,
but it's not only zero. We're going to have a large amount of social costs, up to $50 million in social costs just from Massachusetts that's passed it. So we've got, the expenses are there.
Right.
The downside is minimized and the upside is tremendous, especially if we do the timing right. If we wait too long,
yeah.
You know,
there was some things that came out today. I was reading that the area is saturated with casinos. You probably get emails
I saw that too.
Well, that was about Atlantic City, and sure, because at the time Atlantic City was the only place you could go. So naturally, when competition formed, their business fell off. That's just a normal way of free market. That's just
right. And the more casinos that open, the less they're going to go down there, and it's, you know, those are junkets and stuff like that where people jump on a plane and go or whatever.
You know, malls close, you know, entertainment venues close and things like that. It's normal. It's all part of doing business. Yeah. But you know, if we're live free or die, and we're really about having people having individual freedoms, then who are we to tell someone how to spend their money?
Yeah. All right, I'm going to ask a tough question now. Okay, last night I was at the 4A meeting that they had at the town council, and we looked at what 4A was proposing to bring. The way I view it is the next 20 years, I think Derry and Londonderry is poised to be a big economic boom if we
Londonderry for sure.
Play our cards right. I think it's both myself.
I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the layout of that. I'm looking at my friends who own businesses and where they're planning on it. And I think Londonderry is definitely getting the better.
All right. So can I read in that you're not supporting 4A as a senator? Or?
Not well. If you're talking about a price tag of $50 million, you're looking for $35 million, and you're going to benefit Londonderry. I can tell you right now, I'm not going to be the first one to jump on that because I don't represent Londonderry.
Right, but I think you got to look at it regionally, okay? Because I think it's a partnership between Derry, Londonderry.
Then I want to see Derry get their fair share out of that project, and that's not what I see. Right. I remember initially, was it more than 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when the price tag was only $10 million. Okay, now when that price tag hits $120 million. I think more people will have second thoughts.
Actually,
and I could see it continuing going up.
I think that they had mentioned that last night that it was to do the 4A portion in
How much did they add to it?
Actually, the state said that they would actually take over the project and try to get federal funds so that only Derry was on the hook for their $5 million, Londonderry was on the hook for their $5 million. But I also heard...
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that.
And I also heard there's a third... The developers putting in $5 million as well.
They're going to need to put in more.
Yeah.
But you know, for now, that $5 million commitment has been going on now for 15 years.
But that's all we're obligated for.
I understand. But before I obligate my taxpayers, the people I represent, for another $30–35 million of their property tax money, I'm going to have a hard sell on that for me.
Yeah. Well, wasn't the gas tax supposed to take care of that?
And of course it doesn't. It underfunds the highway division. That's why when I introduced the gambling bill, in that bill it appropriates 25% more money to the highway fund than the gas tax does. And by the way, that was appropriated 2 years before the Democrats and Senator Roush put that bill in. You know, this was 2 years prior to that. We had already taken care of the highway fund. And that's where the money should have been. It should not be on a gas tax. And I feel sorry that our former senator got suckered into that with the Democrats and into writing a bill like that and making us, again, I'm not in favor of the gas tax. We can fund that entire highway fund with the money that it needs from a bill that we have right now, instead of hitting our constituents at a peak summer level when they have to spend all that money on gas.
Well, being a former senator, you know how it works up there. And what I got out of watching what happened this year, it looked like there were a lot of private or backdoor negotiations made on some of these bills.
Well, as you know, Jim, we call that the Christmas tree at the end of the year.
Yeah, the Christmas tree bill.
Or everything gets tacked on, and it's a
Everything's
tit for tat back and forth over basically philosophical and egotistical issues that I think that would be really defused if we have a Republican member of the House and the Senate caucus and vice versa. Yeah. That would solve all that. And I told him, Chuck, the Senate President, that if you can't find it, I'll go. I'll go to the House Republican caucus meetings, as long as we have someone from the House being there. But you have to let them in. The senators don't want to let in a lowly representative.
Right.
They have to work together.
Right.
We have to.
So do you think Chuck Morris would be the Senate President again next term?
Again, all the elections go, but I wouldn't see why not.
Yeah.
Of course, when I was there, I saw 2 Senate presidents, change in where the fighting was. But that was when we had a supermajority of Republicans, and it just doesn't help the party when everybody's fighting.
Right.
We're basically on the same page as far as where our ideals are in philosophy. Mm-hmm. The fringe elements kind of pull in different ways, but that's our job, is to put everyone together and talk it out.
Yeah.
What do you think of? I might as well bring this up because I've asked the other candidate. Well, actually, I haven't asked him yet, but I will. About gun control and that sort of thing, since that bill comes up every single year.
Yep. And that's part of individual rights. As you know, I do military war reenactments for Revolutionary War with Representative Welsh, and we had a bill in about that. The fire marshal wanted to call it pyrotechnics, and they're always trying different ways to come in after gun owners, whether it's black powder, hunting, or different areas, fireworks people, all in the name of safety. And every time that 1 out of a million has an accident, we try to legislate for the one and forget about the other 999,999.
Right.
That's not the right way to do things. The gun rights and Second Amendment is a right. It's a right, and I would do nothing to curtail that right. We need to strengthen that, if anything. And as you know, I don't feel very safe up there in the State House when the Dems are in control, because they only allow the bad guys to carry guns in. So I got a problem with that. I feel rather safe. As you know, most of them are ex-law enforcement and they're ex-military that are on the floor, legislators, and I feel safe.
Isn't it usually typically just the state troopers in the House under the Democrat control? Yeah.
So. We have no metal detectors. We have 2 state troopers. And I know that they're only minutes away in a crisis when every second counts.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I agree with you that was by banning that this past year, not allowing members that were duly licensed to carry it, because it wasn't like everybody was doing it anyway. It wasn't. I don't think that it was an issue that wasn't there.
I didn't. You know what I mean? Outside of one small incident, one
where one might have fallen.
But outside of that, I mean, I never saw anything, and didn't. I didn't see anybody.
Well, as you know, the interesting parts in the late springtime, when the ladies make the motion for men to remove their jackets.
You could tell.
You could tell exactly. They get the jacket on and their sweat's dripping off them, but
they can't take it off.
Yeah, exactly.
No, exactly.
But the thing is that the idea that if you make it illegal, that everybody's going to abide by it is just ludicrous.
A criminal's going to be a criminal anyway.
Right. So at least I know that if someone shot at us from the gallery, my colleagues ex-military.
400 people are going to turn, 300
somebody,
maybe.
But all I know is I'm over by the window, away from the door. I got nowhere to go.
Set. Yeah, you're close to the door over there.
I'm a sitting duck.
Let's talk about, this year they expanded Medicaid.
Yes.
And, the feds came in and said, we'll pay for it 100% for the first 3 years.
I don't believe them. I don't believe
What's the issue coming down the road? I mean, we could be stuck with a huge payment, correct?
Yeah. Well, as you know, what we did was we didn't create our own exchange. Unlike our previous senator and the side that I'm running against, I oppose Obamacare. I am not in favor of Obamacare, and I will not vote for it. I didn't vote for us to participate and create our own exchange with the rest of the Republicans, and I won't. Still the same thing, because I believe that, like all the other federal programs, at some point they shut the dollars off and they tell you you're stuck and you're paying for it.
Right.
That's the problem I have with it. And until they can, that portion of it's taken care of, and we do it in a New Hampshire way, and not the way Mass did it with their health proposal,
right.
That we're going to have, we got to fix it ourselves. But Obamacare is just not the answer.
No, it's going to cost, and particularly here in Derry, where we have Parkland Medical, which is one of the largest employers.
They were out of it.
That's right. I don't see how that my opponents could support voting for a health care proposal that left out our
10
hospital,
which is the largest employer.
The largest employer, Parkland and Dairy, and leave that out. It makes no sense at all.
Private, not public.
Right, and that's why I decided to run. Why I have to run.
Yeah.
You know, Dairy is tied for the third largest community in the state. Only Manchester and Nashua are larger. We're almost the size, Concord, but we're almost the size of Concord.
But
our school system is higher than bigger than Concord. So we're about that third largest size. You know, we need to have representation, I believe, you know, here and from Dairy.
Yeah.
And we have so many critical issues coming up now, everything from the widening of 93, the gaming issues. A lot of these are going to have an impact on our property taxes and our taxes.
Huge.
And you have to have the experience being up there, you know, where the numbers and being on top of those. And that's all, as you know, that's all we've done now for 6 years.
I know, because we're getting close to winding down, but I want to talk about the gambling bill again real quickly, what that means to Dairy, because when I looked at it, you and I discussed it before at the State House, what that means to Dairy, number-wise, of money coming into Dairy was so significant that I truly believe that if that passed and that casino went to Salem, that we could actually truly lower property taxes in this town.
Absolutely we can.
After 4 or 5 years of revenues coming in, it's just amazing what that could do. So why don't you touch on that again?
It's also holding off something else too. It's holding off, you know, at the state level, us imposing new taxes. Remember when the last time we had a crisis for a potential tax reduction, the Claremont issue, that was when we got new taxes. We got an increase in the real estate transfer tax. It was almost doubled. We created an entirely new auto rental tax. We increased the business enterprise tax. We went from 0.25 to 0.75. We increased the BP, business profits tax, from 7 to 8.5%. All of these things that we raised, we didn't need to do. And now we're in a situation where we have new revenue coming in, but I don't want them to go and spend that money right away as the Democrats had proposed.
Right.
I think the way to do it was to put in those tax reductions, place them in, and now if they want to spend more money later, let them argue those points and raise taxes to pay for them if that's what the people want. But at least this way we're going to get something for our dollar.
It's also a non-tax revenue.
Right.
So
again,
but going back to my question real quick, do you believe that if that passed, that we could really lower property taxes in this town?
Well, it depends. If you're not involved in it and you leave it the way it is, where that the surrounding communities get a portion of 1%, you're talking maybe $1 million to Dairy, $1.5 million to Dairy, if you leave it like that. But I know in working with that bill, there's a lot more money there. And I'm going to get Dairy another $4 or $5 million out of it.
But even $1.5 million per year for 5 years.
That's good, but it's not good enough for me, Brian.
That would be huge for us.
We can do better. That bill, there's a lot of places in that bill, for those of us, there's about a handful of us that worked on it extensively. There's money in there, there's money for Dairy in there, there's money for Hampstead, there's money for Wyndham, there's plenty of money for Salem. You know, we got them, it's there, it's just how that bill is drafted and what's written in. And you got to know that bill. It's 100 pages.
Yeah.
You know, but we
it
worked
was pretty intense.
We got about 5 minutes. I know Jim's got another question for us.
I'm just going to ask you this. I'm going to stay on the gambling for now because there was 2 bills presented to us. Which one do you think was better?
Well, the second one, I
personally thought the first one was better.
Well, everybody had their favorites, but you know, there is more. We'd be leaving something on the table, and don't forget what we pass isn't set in stone forever. We can make changes, of course, as we have in the state property tax. But we do know what money's coming in right away, and that is the license fees. That money comes in right away. Now, we can either get $120 million or we can get $200 million. I like the $200 million better because they're willing to pay it. They have not even batted an eyelash on it.
Guaranteed money,
It's guaranteed. Now, here's where the monopoly argument falls apart. There is no monopoly. When we have a job to do in this state, the Executive Council approves a contract. And they pick and choose whoever the bidder is that they feel will do the best job given the circumstances. That's exactly the way that the gambling bill would work. The same as the Executive Council. There's not monopolies. It's if you want, if anybody that's eligible that has the money, just like if you have the money to go to the store, you can't go to the store. You know, who has the money can bid on that project and to try to get it. So
but those are the Republicans that voted against it. I know a lot of the Dems that voted against it because they want the income tax. So you really there's a lot of different philosophies about it, which is very interesting.
But you know, Brian, I think that in the 90s, I was up there when gambling was indefinitely postponed. And for our viewers, what that means is that means you can't even discuss the issue. It can't even come up in the term. That's how many, the supermajority to do that. You saw there with the suspense of 172 to 172. And now with another 23 votes next time, whether you're for it or whether you're against it, it's going to pass next term. The question is whether or not we as a town in Derry are going to be able to lower our property taxes with the passage of that bill or not. And again, I humbly ask for their vote, because with that, I am going to lower your property taxes.
Okay.
That is a big issue. Okay.
We should probably wrap up. Let Frank give his final pitch to the audience, if you want.
Last words before we go.
You know what? My record stands for itself. You know, I've been involved in Derry for a long time with my kids going through the system. I try to look at things in a neutral way, but I'm very familiar with what's going on right now in Concord, and Derry could stand to have a sizable property tax reduction or on that verge, and that's all I've been in this for since I was in my early 30s. That's why I go up there for. I knock on doors and I see people that are struggling to stay in their homes, and I want them to stay, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep you here.
Great.
All right, well, thank you for coming on the show, and we're going to close with this. This has been the Legislators Lounge. You can find us on the internet. Our web address is derrylounge.com. We're also on Facebook. If you search Legislators Lounge, you can pick us up on Facebook. And you can also find us on YouTube if you search Legislators Lounge. All our videos are on YouTube from the beginning. So there's actually quite a few on the gambling issue, because we've done several shows on it. So you can kind of look back and see what we've been through. So once again, I'm Jim Webb, the host of the show. My co-host Brian Chericello. And we want to thank Frank Sapareto for being with us today. And until the next show.